West Florida Public Library presents Explore Pensacola History, a lecture series highlighting more than 450 years of Escambia County's history. Join us as we explore the people, places, and events that make up our area's unique heritage. Major funding for Explore Pensacola History was provided through a grant from the Florida Humanities Council with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording do not necessarily represent those of the Florida Humanities Council or the National Endowment for the Humanities. Additional funding was provided by the Friends of West Florida Public Library, whose ongoing generosity provides these and other first-class programs to the people of Escambia County. For more information or to become a friend of the library, visit them online at friendsofwfpl.com.
Well, thank you for being here today, and it's really nice because I was talking to Mike about this earlier, that back in the 1960s when I was a little kid, and I used to love coming here. This was like the place with all the books, and I just remember being mesmerized and going up that stair and going to the history section. And so it's really nice to be here doing this tonight. The reason I'm here tonight and talking about this project I did trying to explore what is the Panhandle is basically I got ticked off. I got tired of looking at books on Florida and seeing nothing about Pensacola or a picture coffee table book of Florida with maybe a picture of Fort Pickens if we're lucky. Even on a map, we're not included. They often cut the Panhandle off or put it as an island in the Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Tampa. We're in the other time zone. We're not in the, and people from like Tallahassee refer to those people the other side of the river. It's like we're the bastard stepchild of Florida. And people say, oh, there's nothing between Pensacola and Tallahassee. That I-10 corridor of nothing but endless pine forest and boringness. Get off the road. Now, make sure you're packing heat, but get off the road. But what I wanted to do was, there's something really here. I mean, I've grown up this area. I knew these places. I wanted to share the treasures that we have, both natural and ecological and historical, with other people who say, oh, there's nothing here. I mean, we've got a history that rivals much of the state of Florida. And it's just amazing. I've talked with people who have lived here most of their lives and still didn't know this stuff was here. Sometimes even in their own county or their own town. And so it's been a wonderful exploration. And I decided to choose the topic area between the Perdido and the Apalachicola River area. I know some people include Tallahassee, but when you get into Tallahassee, that's the Big Bend area, sweeping down towards Cedar Key, the mouth of the Swanee River, all that area. It's got different ecology, a different history. There's politicians there. I may do that for the next book. You can divide. It's definitely a geographical, a historical, cultural division. And so we'll start here with the history. And history goes back here to, the 1550s with Tristan de Luna's ill-fated attempt. But Pensacola was permanently established in 1698-99. And here's a wonderful photograph, not a photograph, but a cutting of Pensacola on Santa Rosa Island in the 1740s. They thought this would be a secure location, wonderful to build a colonial tiny city on a barrier island. Now, apparently, they never heard of hurricanes. I mean, it's just one hurricane after others just swept across this area. And where it's located is basically where the campground area is of Fort Pickens. And so finally, by the 1750s, said enough is enough, and they moved to what is today, present day, downtown Pensacola. Here is the gold that the Spanish were looking for but lost and missed. The longleaf yellow pine. There's no gold and silver and stuff like here, but they had these longleaf yellow pine trees that stretched in endless waves from the Tallahassee area up to Baldwin County and into South Alabama. There were these trees 400 years old, 75 feet to the first limb, 120 feet high. I mean, these were giants of the time. And this is what many of our ancestors that lived in this area finally discovered. Hey, this is something we can make money at. And they did it so well, they cut them all down. And that's why we no longer have a thriving lumber industry anymore. And this is what you'd see 100 years ago if you looked through the Panhandle. They were harvesting these boundless, endless forests of yellow pine, thinking they would last forever, with these oxen carts that haul these huge logs to the many mills scattered from Pensacola to the Apalachicola River. The railroads extended what they could do even further into the interior, bringing even more lumber to the mill towns, but also depleting the lumber. After the large lumber is cut, by the early 1900s, people were converting over to harvesting turpentine or naval stores. And this is a lost art. This was essential. Age of wooden ships, you had to have turpentine, you had to have pitch to make sure the ship was watertight. Every ship had barrels of pitch and turpentine in it. And so this was a very thriving industry. All those pines are being harvested. It was brutal work. I mean, for instance, to get cut the tree, sometimes you do 6,000 to 8,000 trees a week, and that's one person. Yeah, it built up a lot of energy and strength. Now, I'm starting out with Escambia County. We're going to move our way eastward tonight, a whirlwind tour. Buckle up your seatbelt. And there in the north end of the county, we have the Alger-Sullivan Historic District, town of Century. Believe it or not, it was named in 1900. New century. And so this was typical of a large mill town that thrived for several decades and then fell out of use. But the people there knew the historic value of the buildings and have created a wonderful little historic district there in the Alger-Sullivan Historic District. Got a little museum there. They're restoring a steam locomotive. So it's good to see these small communities caring about their past and heritage and trying to preserve it. Also, in the north end of the county, Barrow Park, and one of those places you've heard of but you've never been. And right there in the middle of this wonderful farmland, you have this beautiful, charming Catholic church. And once again, another little historical society, very active. And of course, UWF, or the Archaeology Institute. A lot of people don't realize that this is a wonderful treasure trove of many artifacts that archaeologists have discovered both on land and underwater for the last 15 or 20 years here in the West Florida area. I mean, you can see parts of the lunar wrecks and things of this nature, and right there is a wonderful showcase of how important the UWF Archaeology Institute has been in uncovering and chronicling our heritage here in the Panhandle. Moving down Scenic Highway, the old Chimney. This was a site of a planing mill that was burned in Confederate scorched earth policy back in 1862, the remains of Civil War engagement. And a lot of people go by there and don't even realize the history of it. And of course, the Escambia Bay Bluffs. It's Scenic Highway because it goes across the bluffs. Now, if you notice this picture, this is taken in the 60s. Notice the outfits. Because you cannot find a good photograph, modern one, of the bluffs because they're all covered over now trying to prevent erosion. And so this is how it looked back in the 50s and 60s. It was very noticeable, and that's a problem. It causes more erosion to have it like this. And of course, that kudzu's not really doing anything. It's just covering it up. It's not really preserving it. And that kudzu's so bad. I'll go to the Scenic Highway in the summertime. I'll see strands of it try to reach out and grab my tires and flame it into the bay. That stuff will grow fast. I'll stop at Prattville once in Alabama, at Cracker Barrel, and the car next to me, there was a kudzu field, and the vines had wrapped around the front bumper. I said, now how long have they been parked? Let's get this to go, folks. Don't want to stay too long. Now, the pride of Pensacola is our downtown historic area. In the old Christ Church, one of the earliest Protestant churches of the Panhandle, has been lovingly restored there on Seville Square. And I love including this because some of you may know who this is in the Living History program. That's Della Scott Ireton, head of FPAN today. And there she is making candles, doing her part. But this is a great place for families and visitors, tourists to see exactly what it was like, what life was like during this time period. The wonderful restored Barkley House, which has been added to now and new restorations done. But the Barkley House is one of the oldest structures there from the early 1800s, right there on the waterfront. The Museum of Commerce in historic Pensacola Village recreates like an early 1900, 1890 street scene in downtown Pensacola. Across the street, we got the Museum of Industry, focused on lumber, turpentine, the red snapper industry, the brick business. And of course, we are lucky enough to keep restored that wonderful Renaissance revival style City Hall, which was built in the early 1900s there on Ferdinand Plaza. And now it's the T.T. Wentworth Jr. Florida State Museum, and just one of the show places there. No longer there, but this has become a historical document. Now it's the Children's Museum, the Pensacola Historical Society Museum, which was in the Arbona building. And of course, the 1902 L&M Marine Terminal, known mainly as being close to Fish House. So, when you park there, you can smell the grits, yeah. Inside is Destination Archaeology Resource Center, the Florida Public Archaeology Network, highlighting Florida archaeology in the Panhandle, but all the state. So we have a lot of resource just within a couple blocks walking distance. Up here on Wright Street, the Governor Perry House, a wonderfully preserved structure going back to the mid-1800s. And then North Hill, the North Hill Historic District. It was very difficult to pick out which one of these wonderful houses to choose. I tried to find one with some little towers and gingerbread trim. And, I really hate to say this, but every time I try to take pictures of these houses, I start lusting after them. It's just very sad. Moving to the west side of the county, Turkin Bayou Preserve State Park, which feeds into Perdido Bay. This is a wonderful, very neglected little state reserve. You can walk down through a pitcher plant preserve, and sometimes today you can see dolphins swimming and bald eagles flying over. Just a beautiful, pristine wilderness. Not very far from Dog Track Road. The most western state park in Florida is Perdido Key State Park. If you keep on going, you get to the Floribama Lounge. And then you can toss a mullet. We also have Big Lagoon State Park overlooking the Intracoastal Waterway with a 3-story observation deck. And of course, there at the Pensacola Naval Air Station is the wonderfully preserved Fort Barrancas. A lot of people know Fort Pickens better. It's got its great, greatness to it, but I always love Fort Barrancas because it is so well preserved. Fort Pickens is in ruins, but Fort Barrancas really is one of the best preserved of these coastal defense forts. And of course, if you're there, you might as well go to the Pensacola Lighthouse. It's only 192 steps or something like that. It's worth it. And wouldn't that be the best place up there to see a Blue Angels air show? You see them flying below you. And wouldn't that be a great place to be during a lightning storm? Well, maybe not, but I bet you'll remember it forever. And of course, the nationally recognized National Museum of Naval Aviation, you can actually see the Blue Angels flying anytime. They're not grounded. And we really have one of the best collections, a real national treasure here right underneath our very noses. And of course, a lot of people come here because of the white sand beaches, a beautiful Pensacola beach. And there's why people come down here. I showed this to some people I knew from up north in Minnesota. They said, "Oh, it does snow in Florida." I said, "What?" I said, "Look at all that snow." I said, No, that's sand. They just don't understand it really does look like sugar. Across the pass is the historic Fort Pickens in Gulf Islands National Seashore. Fort Pickens is one of the few American forts that kept the American flag flying over it throughout the entire American Civil War. And moving over to Santa Rosa County, farming has always been a big part of the lifestyle of the panhandlers. And so the Gabbert Family Farm Museum has a wonderful collection of old tractors, farm equipment. They have a peanut festival every year. One of the coolest things they used to do, they had an anvil shoot. And these guys would take black powder and shoot an anvil 500 feet up into the air. And folks, you've not really lived until you've seen that happen. But remember, you always stay 550 feet back. Yeah. One of the great resources we have here is Blackwater River State Forest, encompassing much of northern Santa Rosa, Okaloosa County. These beautiful, pristine creeks, and perfect for tubing, for kayaking, for canoeing. And we have the white sand, just like the beaches, but there's no salt in it. Actually, this is upper cold water, and you see that you go around the bend, you see that dark area? That's the entrance of a little slough. And you go up there 100 yards, and that's where about 20 years ago, they killed that alligator that's been eating all the hunting dogs. You know, we got a lot of national publicity, and all the hunting dogs were disappearing. They killed this alligator, and they found the tags, the dog tags in it, going back like a dozen years. Yeah, he was eating them for dessert. Wow. And this is a swimming place. I can take you there anytime, but just always make sure you can see the bottom. You know, if you see a dark shape coming your way, it's every person from the cells. Just make sure you're faster than the slowest person. Now, this is the kind of pine trees we have in the forest today. These are just puny, third-rate growth. Nothing like those giant virgin pines that had at one time. But you wait 350 years, folks. It will be magnificent. We have high ground. We're not talking about fire ant hills. This is Red Rock Bluff. It's about 50 to 60 feet above Juniper Creek in Blackwater River State Park. And also about 15 miles from here, we have an iron mountain made out of ironstone. I know, go figure. Here's what people come for. They call this area the canoeing capital of the Southeast, and there's one of the reasons. And here's Deton Bridge at Blackwater River State Park. I spent half my childhood here, and there's that wonderful, looks like a sweet iced tea, doesn't it? Speaking of which, getting thirsty. Oh my goodness. Moving on to Milton and the Arcadia Mill Archaeological Site. Back in the early 1800s, this was Florida's largest industrial park. There was a sawmill here, water-powered sawmill, a planing mill. There was a bucket factory, a rock quarry, a railroad, a textile mill, first in the state of Florida, a silk cocoonery. It really was a huge industrial site. Back then, Santa Rosa County was the most industrial county in the state of Florida. Now it's the leading producer of peanuts and cotton. Go figure. We've got some great structures in Milton. The 1855 Masonic Lodge. Very few antebellum structures have remained, but this is one that's still there. We saved the Imogene Theater. This was taken right after the humongous fire a few years ago. You can look at the left side and see all the charred remains. Lovingly been restored. If you haven't had a chance, get over there and see how they really brought her back to life. A wonderful preservation effort, because we thought once that whole block went up, I was there that night watching that fire. It was a horrible thing to see. The wind just kept beating and the rain wouldn't come. It was a horrendous thing. We also have a wonderful Milton Historic District, a lot of walk-in areas, beautiful houses here. The Old Exchange Hotel in downtown Milton. St. Mary's Episcopal Church, wonderful Gothic style there. The Alger House, another house I lust after, has a whole block, it's just a beautiful yard accompanying with it. And then on the east side of Milton, the Old Brick Road, Highway 1. This was the longest paved highway in the Panhandle when it opened in 1921, only 6 miles long. But people from Pensacola would come over here with their cars to go up and down it and go up to 30 miles per hour. This was staggering. In fact, the people of Milton were so happy when they opened it that in 1921 there were 10,000 people that showed up for the opening day celebration. And there was dancing on the streets of Milton at midnight, and that has not happened since. Another one of our preserved treasures is the old 1909 L&N Railroad Depot in Milton, which is now the home of the West Florida Railroad Museum. They have several depots and dining cars and wonderful railroad memorabilia. This was dilapidated in the early 1970s. People are thinking about tearing it down. It was turned into a bicentennial project, and this is how the Santa Rosa Historical Society was created, trying to preserve this building. Then in Baghdad, the small mill town south of Milton, we have a wonderful, neoclassical revival style 1840s Thompson house. And inside, there's actual Civil War graffiti written on the walls. I keep asking, listen, a little bonhomie will take that off, and they get really upset when I say that. Just kidding. We have the 1885 Baghdad United Methodist Church, some beautiful structures in downtown Baghdad. The BVPA, we say that instead of saying the Baghdad Village Preservation Association, but I have a wonderful museum about the history of this mill town. At one time in the 1890s, Baghdad was one of the world's largest exporter of yellow pine lumber. Further down on that peninsula, the Gar-Sun Point Peninsula, you have the Yellow River Marsh Preserve State Park. Some wonderful hiking trails. Do not go when it's been raining. It's pretty rough, but if you want primitive wilderness, we do have it. On the Santa Rosa Peninsula near Gulf Breeze, we have relics of the old Pensacola to St. Augustine Road. This road was completed in 1826. And it looks basically like it did then. This is part of the Naval Live Oaks Plantation. And if you see in the distance that road going up the hill, that is that huge red bluff you see where you cross over to Gulf Breeze and look to the left. That's that huge bluff. And yes, we do have heights. This is a view from that bluff. And a lot of people love going to this place, and then kids like to roll down and drag their parents with them and stuff like this. And this thing is always growing because the northern winds in the winter blow this sand up there. It's burying some of the trees. It gets taller every year. You can actually stand on this sand dune at the top of this ridge and see Portofino and stuff from Pensacola Beach across the sound. In Holly, we have Raymond Melvin's Turpentine and Logging Museum. I mentioned earlier, this was a lost art. He has preserved so much of the original tools that were used in this trade and knows all this stuff inside and outside. And here are children being terrorized by birds in Navarre Beach. It's very sad. Moving to Okaloosa County, you can see some of that tannic water. You see why they call it Blackwwer River, because all the tannic, the leaching of the trees and stuff gives it sort of that really deep iced tea look. That's Kennedy Bridge, and that is actual white sand that's natural. We also have some heights. There's Hurricane Lake, Blackwwer River State Forest, a really very large man-made lake. The Baker Block Museum, wonderful little museum. They've got a great geological society with computers, and they've been really active at preserving local cabins, log cabins, gin houses, old post offices, preserving it for future generations. In Crestview, the old Carver Hill Memorial Museum. Carver Hill was the local African American high school, and they preserved a lot of it, and this has become a center of the African American Historical Society there in Crestview. Moving down to Valparaiso and Niceville, the Turkey Creek Nature Trail separates these two towns. This wonderful little boardwalk goes for about a half a mile up this river and this creek, and this is exactly how it looks like, this crystal clear water. Another forgotten gem, Rocky Bayou State Park, which feeds into Chautauqua Bay. And at Valparaiso, the Heritage Museum of Northwest Florida has many exhibits. Here's an old frontier homestead type of exhibit, pioneering all these different facets, the seafood industry, the lumber industry. There's a lot of forgotten gems that people know nothing about. Eglin, which incorporates Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, Walton counties, has enormous amounts of archaeological resources. And the Office of Cultural Resources has some wonderful stuff going back to the prehistoric period, thousands of years old, and stuff from V1, V2 rockets after World War II, different test sites. I mean, they have to, frisk you pretty hard to get in here, but it's definitely worth a trip over there. Now, something that the public is easier to get to is the Air Force Armament Museum at Eglin Air Force Base. It's got, the Blackbird, the spy plane, huge amounts of aircraft there, some like replicas of what the Doolittle bombers were. And the Jimmy Doolittle trained there at Eglin for his historic raid over Tokyo there in early 1942. And so a lot of really interesting history. And like I said, this is open to the public. Now down on Highway 98 in Fort Walton Beach, people drive by this every day and don't realize this is the largest Indian temple mound between here and Tallahassee. Right there in all those trees. next to all the t-shirt shops and tattoo parlors. And inside, we have some of the best collections of Native American artifacts on the Gulf Coast. They also preserve the Camp Walton schoolhouse, over 100 years old. You get a glimpse into what life was like for students back then. One thing, they didn't have to know as much history. Back then, you only reached Fort Walton by water. There was no roads and things. And the first tourists would come down and stay for the summer in these old type hotels. There were about 6 or 7 there. The only one left from that golden age of tourism is the 1906 Gulfview Hotel in downtown Fort Walton Beach. If you want to know where it's at, it's right behind Staff's Seafood Restaurant, which last year turned to 100 years old as well. Not the food, just the business. The Governor Stone schooner is an interesting artifact for the Panhandle. This is a movable historic site. It's from 1877, typical of the schooners around this area. And this is where it was docked in Fort Walton. It's currently being restored now. They always do have, a boat is constantly maintenance worthy. And so sometimes it goes to Apalachicola, it goes to Freeport, it goes to different places throughout the year. And of course, the beaches of Destin. I was in Destin right by the marina and the Lucky Snapper a few years ago, but by that huge condo. And these little ladies from South Florida said, "Excuse me, we're looking for the quaint fishing village of Destin." I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you missed it by 40 years. We also have the Destin History and Fishing Museum, which even includes a rod and reel owned by Ernest Hemingway, "Be Still My Beating Heart." Woo! If it had not been for these state parks, everything from Pensacola, from Perdido all the way to Panama City would be one giant condominium. But we see a little section like this at Henderson Beach where it actually is pristine. This is what the Gulf Coast once looked like. Back in the 1950s, my grandfather was offered this land, said sell it for like $25 an acre. He said, "That's too expensive. There's no utilities, no running water, no electricity out there." Now, he later regretted that, and so did I. Moving to Walton County has the highest point in Florida, Britton Hill. And it doesn't look like much. This is actual view. It's about 345 feet high, which is the highest point in the state of Florida. There's a little marble obelisk that marks it, or granite, and there's the High Point Club, and they go to the highest points in all 50 states. They love starting in Florida because you get in a car, park your car, and walk 15 feet and touch this little marker. That's your hike. Now, Alaska is different. We have natural bridges. In North Walton County, this is a natural limestone bridge with fossil seashells embedded in it. The county's trying to turn it into a county park. Lake Defuniak, this is one of my favorite places. Look at that beautiful circular lake, probably the relics of a very old sinkhole. Now, the story goes that William D. Chipley was setting up the P&A Railroad back in the 1880s, and they found this beautiful lake and said, "Man, we got to build some type of city on it." And Chipley wanted to name it after himself. Well, he got out a card game, and the story goes that Fred Defuniak, another member of the P&A, won the hand of cards and got the chance to name it. And so Chipley had to sell for Chipley over in Washington County. But that's where it's called Lake Defuniak. Back in the 1880s to the 1920s, the Florida Chautauqua, they were looking for a warmer climate than the one up in upper state New York. And this was a very popular movement before television and radio. It was basically leisure learning educational activities. For several weeks, thousands of people would come from many different states over here to Defuniak Springs. There was an auditorium that held 3,000 people. And by the 20s, it sort of lost favor, but in the 1990s, it was reborn. In fact, they just had, a couple weeks ago, their annual Chautauqua meeting. Around the circle, that round lake, you see some beautiful Queen Anne Victorian-style homes. There's one I lust after. Oh, my goodness. Oh, just look at that, this little tiny cottage. Oh my goodness. Oh, just stop it, stop it. I could live there. Just all you do is look out on the lake, and it's just, oh. And we also have the preserved 1882 Defuniak Springs L&N Depot. The Walton County Heritage Museum is located there. And let me tell you, when the train goes by there, you can feel it. You can see all the artifacts are jiggling. Oh no. We also have the old Hotel Chautauqua, Defuniak Springs. You can tell it's also the Masonic Lodge up top with that symbol there. And Bogey's Restaurant's pretty cool next to it. Sunbright Manor, this was Governor Catt's home. Governor Catt was the governor of Florida back in the teens. One of his campaign slogans, even the dogs go after cats. I wonder if he had 9 lives. Moving to South Walton. Eden Garden State Park. I mean, it looks like Tara from Gone with the Wind. You have these beautiful live oak trees with resurrection ferns and the Spanish moss hanging there, and overlook a little bayou that goes out into Chautauqua Bay. Back in the 1890s, a lumber baron family built this place. It was preserved over the years, and now it's part of a state park. Also, back in the early 70s, a really stupid eco-horror movie was filmed there called Frogs with Ray Milland. And it really was a bad movie, but it was funny, if you listen to the movie, you hear frogs in the background, and it just grows throughout the 90 minutes, I mean, couldn't you run away from a frog? But every time I go here, there is either a wedding reception or a wedding taking place or some type of prom event, but it really is a beautiful place. And if you go east of here, you're east of Eden. True story. And here's the other reason people come to South Walton County, those beautiful coastal dunes. I showed this to some people, said, so, okay, if that's sand, why do they pile it up with bulldozers and stuff? So what? Why is it piled up like that? It's called sand dunes. Oh my gosh. I mean, just look at that. That just makes you want to go in right there. We also have these coastal dune lakes. Yeah, I grew up in this area. I just knew there were these lakes that were right next to the Gulf of Mexico. And I didn't realize how rare they are. They're created when, there's a storm in the Gulf, creates this lake, and then it connects. So you got brackish and fresh water and salt water mixing all together. And then it'll get completely sealed off, and then another storm will open it up. And these have very rare ecological zones in them. And the largest concentration of them in the world is here. The only place that they exist is on an isolated coast of Africa and part of Australia. But here is the largest concentration, stretching all the way from Destin to the Panama City area. If you want to get away from the crowds of the beach, go to Grayton Beach State Park. You don't have to worry about the crowds. It's pristine. I mean, there's your example of what we're looking at here. Just beautiful scenery. This is why so many people go to 30A and down by Seaside and all those kind of places. And there's another one of those coastal dune lakes. If you look at the distance, you see the dune ridge, and beyond that is the Gulf of Mexico. A storm will occur, and eventually it will connect back to the Gulf and then seal up again. And of course, I had to mention Seaside. Back in the 1980s, Mr. Davis decided to create the new part of the new urbanism where he recreated like the Mayberry concept where everybody can just walk to wherever you're going to. And ironically enough, it's most famous now for being the site of the Truman Show with Jim Carrey. I remember the movie had just come out. I took some people there. I said, this is where they filmed it. And they said, where's the giant dome? I said, oh my gosh. But Seaside is a charming place. They've tried to replicate it just dozens of times over on 30A, but there is a place there right next to 98. It's a yogurt shop, and you could get key lime pie, frozen key lime pie dipped in chocolate on a stick. It's $7. It's worth every penny. Field trip. One of the places on 30A that is pristine is one of these coastal dune lakes called Deer Lake State Park. You can travel down boardwalk all the way to the Gulf. This is what you see. And it's one of those pristine places. If you look to the left, you see the condos of Panama City. You look to the right, you'll see the condos of San Destin. And here is what people come for, those beautiful beaches. Move up to Holmes County, Ponce de Leon Springs State Park, 68 degrees constantly year long. Now, it's a very popular recreational site in the summer, and I wanted to get an underwater shot of the cave, so I went in early May on Saturday morning, like at 8 o'clock. It was too cold. I got down in there, I didn't have a wetsuit or anything. I just had a little snorkel, underwater camera. I got up there to my neck, tried to do like this, tried to acclimatize for 10 minutes, and still, so I just, forget it. I just click. It was so boring, I couldn't see anything. But I bet it's nice and brown July and August. And there's another view of the little state park there. A lot of diving places there, the Vortex Spring nearby Morrison Springs. I can't even spell it. I got it, Holmes County. It's Holmes, but hey, the people there call it Holmes. The Keith Cabin, this is a log cabin on its original foundations in the little Pittman community in North Holmes County. The Holmes County Historical Society Museum in Bonifay. Some of the old houses, if these houses were in downtown Pensacola, there'd be enormous amounts of money. But there's some really beautiful little charming places in these Panhandle communities. And there's the Pate House. It's the oldest brick house in Holmes County. It may be the only one. Just kidding. Historic downtown Chipley, right there where the railroad comes through. The old Chipley City Hall and Fire Department. There's one of the historic homes there, beautiful house. I love this shot. They preserved the old water tower. I just love those old community water towers there. And right down the road from Chipley is Falling Water State Park. This is the tallest waterfall in the state of Florida. And you see that exit on the interstate? It's only 10 minutes off the interstate. Next time you get a chance, you got a few minutes, get off of there. It's not very far. They take you down a boardwalk, there's a bunch of sinkholes, and this stream falls about 90 feet into a cylindrical sinkhole. And you get right down there. If you got fear of heights, you may not want to go. But it's all got these ferns on it. It's a microclimate. It is not, you don't even feel like you're in Florida anymore. This is a natural formation. Not far from Falling Waters is Rock Hill. This is ironstone and limestone on the top of this hill, not very far from Interstate 10. And the Nature Conservancy now controls this land, so it's protected. But this is actually a natural formation. And everything is eroded out except this. A lot of wonderful sites here. In Wausau, south of Chipley in Washington County, we have the Possum Monument. Where else are you going to see a marble monument to the lowly possum? The possum saved a lot of people in the Panhandle from starvation back in the Great Depression. And the first Saturday in August, they have their annual Possum Day Fun Festival. They start out with a possum trot run, 5K possum trot run. Then there is the possum parade. And then everybody goes to the Possum Palace. It's like an old county fair. And you get possum on a stick. Just tastes like greasy chicken. But with sweet potatoes, it's pretty good, especially if you get them stall fed. And then they have the crowning of the possum king and queen and the possum auction. Yes. When my son was like 5 years old, I took him for the first time. He took all the money he could find, like $20, because he wanted to buy a possum at the possum auction. So the opening bid was $75. And he just looked at me like somebody ran over his puppy. He's just blown out. Oh. And then the possum sold for $350. Now, he said, Daddy, we can make some serious money on this. But basically, it's local people, politicians, run for office stuff. They're donating this to charity. That's not the actual possum market value, okay? Now, about 5 years ago, he talked me into, said, listen, why don't we go back to that possum festival and sell stuffed possums? Little teddy bears, but possums. So, I said, okay, you talk me into it. I'll humor you. It'll be something to remember forever. So I ordered a whole bunch of stuffed possums from this factory in California. I got on the phone and said, how many do you want? I said, you know, such and such. I said, and there was this long, I just got, what do you want them for? I said, I'm going to take you to the Possum Festival. Whatever. Just like, so we set up a little booth there, had a little, you know, a little umbrella over us. And my mother said, tie some pink ribbons around some of them, they'll be girl possums. And my son said, oh no, don't do that. I said, no, it's not a bad idea. The first possum sold was a girl possum. So my son says, make more. So I'm over there taking a little pink ribbon, making girl possums as fast as I can. And of all things, we sold out by noon. There was no more, you know. And you know, we made some money. I gave it all to him because it was his idea. And the next year he said, you want to go back? I said, no, I think we saturated the market. Oh my goodness. But Washington County also has some beautiful first-rate springs. People do scuba diving. They know about these places. This is near Vernon. Look at Cypress Springs. That's just gorgeous. The Moss Hill Methodist Church is in Washington County. I love this. Here's the interior. What's neat about this, in the wood on the ceiling, you can see the prints, the thumbprints and fingerprints of the builders still stuck in the rosin. I mean, that is really hands-on history. Some more springs, Williford Spring. The chutes, Ecofina Creek, which flows into St. Andrews Bay, it looks almost like a log flume. You can see in the blue, that's a kayaker in the distance. You really have to know what you're doing there. Here's another view of Ecofina Creek, just beautiful. And north of Panama City, you got Pitt Spring. It really is that blue. The Gator Group Spring Group on Ecofina Creek. And let's just look at that. That kayak looks like it's floating in the air. Just some gorgeous sights. And here's what looks like underwater at one of these sites, Emerald Spring. I mean, we don't have to go down to Central Florida to find really cool springs. Going into Panama City Beach, there's Camp Helen State Park. Back in the early 1900s, this textile mill up in North Alabama built this as an employee summer retreat. Right there on, there's a beautiful Lake Powell there. And also people think about spring break in Panama City Beach. We also have Man in the Sea Museum dedicated to man's underwater exploration. They have one of the only original U.S. Navy Sea Lab 1. In the 1960s, not only were they doing outer space, they were also exploring the depths of the ocean. In St. Andrews State Park, we have a reconstructed turpentine still. There were hundreds of these scattered across the Panhandle 100 years ago. And there's some examples, St. Andrews State Park, and there's some of that beautiful sand that has been pulled up by bulldozers. In Panama City, we do have some old historic homes, historic Sap House, the Martin Theater, beautiful Art Deco. The Junior Museum of Bay County has also preserved some old log homes. And even a little community like Callaway has preserved this little schoolhouse. The Schmidt-Goddard Farm, this was built in the 1920s over in a rural area of Bay County. Right next to it is a garage with an old Model T in the garage and another shed that has a sugarcane mill in it, just like somebody walked away from it in 1925. Mexico Beach, you go down Highway 98, past Panama City, past Tyndall Air Force Base, you get some more of those beautiful Gulf coastal dunes. And Mexico Beach, I love it because most people don't go that far where they're going to Panama City. You still see some of the old coastal dune cottages that people went to back in the 40s and 50s. How long those things will remain there, we don't know. It's one of those little places of forgotten time. I love Mexico Beach because back in the 20s, one of the promoters claimed this was the only place you could get milk-fed fish. He said he would actually fence off part of the Gulf and put the cows out there, and the fish would come up and suckle their udders. This is not true. But keep in mind, this is a real estate developer. Read used car salesman. Never let the truth stand in the way of a good story. In Jackson County, we have the old Chipola Hotel, now some apartment buildings. Another antebellum mansion, Eli Krigler House in Mariana. This one is in bad shape. They're trying to restore it. This might be the last picture we have of it. A beautiful place, just crying out for grant money and restoration. They did fix up the Russ House in Marianna. And so, now it's the Chamber of Commerce. And of course, we got the only caverns in the state of Florida at Marianna. Just north there is Florida Cavern State Park. There's also Blue Hole Spring. There's a sign, I could get this in there, a sign on the right says, "Alligator, swim at your own risk." Well, yeah. And one of the places a lot of people go in Jackson County is Jackson Blue Springs. This was a Spanish mission site back in the 1600s. It's a beautiful place, big spring head. And by the way, there's some sort of stupid movie being filmed there in the last couple months called Sharkensaw. Like Sharknado and all that sort of stuff. It's supposed to be set in Arkansas, where suddenly this subterranean ocean erupts out and sharks come out of the ground and start eating people, usually in bikinis. Yes, they're filming it in Marianna. And so I'm going to say, I'm going to have to buy that just to see how bad it is. Why can't they ever film a good movie here? And there's an underwater shot of Jackson Blue Springs. A lot of great fossils in the Chipola River downstream too. Greenwood has, suppose this is the oldest structure in Jackson County, in Greenwood. The beautiful Great Oaks Bryan Mansion has been restored. And over to the west, or to the east there, you got Lake Seminole, Three River State Park, where the Flint River and the Chattahoochee River combine and create the Apalachicola River. Moving down to Calhoun County, the beautiful Chipola River and Sunrise. And we actually have rapids. The Look and Tremble Falls on the Chipola River. I know it's not like Snake River or the Colorado, but folks, we take what we can get around here. And there's another shot of the Chipola River. And in Blountstown, the county seat, luckily, they did not tear down the old Gothic-style hotel, not hotel, but courthouse. So many times they'll build a new courthouse and tear down this beautiful structure that historians and historic preservationists love. This is not the case here. They have preserved it. What's interesting, I found out just about a year ago that one of the architects of this is my wife's great-great-great-grandfather or something. It is a small world. It's called the Panhandle. The Panhandle Pioneer Settlement in Blountstown has a wonderful selection of restored structures from Calhoun County all in one location. They do a lot of living history here. They have chickens there and people farming stuff. This is an 1820s log cabin. Here's the 1840s Wells family log home. Just a beautiful, you could spend a whole day at this. And this was so typical. See all the white sand around this? Back then, these frontier homesteads did not have any lawn. That's a fire hazard. That's a snake hazard. It was just hard pan dirt and sand. And here's an up-to-date 1897 Yon family farmhouse with a detachable kitchen. Woo, woo. Dr. Dowling's office, Dr. Dowling delivered thousands of children there in the 20th century, there in the Blountstown area. And the office is like you step back in time, and I tell you what, when you go through there, it gives you the creeps. Look at the kind of stuff they use as medical instruments back then. Scared just thinking about it. The Frank Gymnasium, most gymnasiums like this were torn down. They preserved this as a great meeting hall. The Alta Calaboose has been taken and reassembled at Blountstown. And this was old jailhouse. Sadly, the guy who designed it eventually got drunk and they threw him in here, caught pneumonia, and he died. There's a moral there. The 1941 Clarksville Post Office and General Store, and this is where the little gift shop is. And speaking of last train to Clarksville, the old Marianna and Blountstown Railroad display. This was so typical of these logging railroads that we saw up and down the Panhandle. Now across the river, Liberty County, very sparsely populated. This is the Gregory House, built in 1849. It actually used to be on the west side of the river, but then in the 1930s, the Triple C's, the CCC, disassembled it, numbered everything, took it across on this bluff, and reassembled it. And they didn't have any parts left over. It was so cool. This is Torreya State Park. This is a view from the house. Looking down on the Apalachicola River, there's some actual Confederate gun emplacements on a trail just below here. There's the front of the house, or the back of the house, depending on how you view it. And here's another nice little find. The CCC constructed a stone bridge, several there in Torreya. It's called Torreya because of the very rare conifer tree called Torreyas. There was a huge blight about 15 years ago, but they're making a big comeback. Just south of Torreya at Bristol is Alum Bluff. This is several hundred feet high, overlooking the Apalachicola River. The Nature Conservancy owns this. It has an excellent hiking trail, 3 miles, up and down ravines. Do not go unless it's between October and March. You know, it's pretty strenuous, but it's definitely worth the view at the end. In Bristol, the Veterans Memorial Railroad has preserved a little miniature railroad. They're opening up a museum for their community. And one of the oldest structures in Liberty County is Wesleyan Methodist Church in Hosford, which is not very far from Tallahassee. Now moving down to Gulf County, Wee-Wah-Hitchcock, woohoo! Used to be the original county seat, today it's Port St. Joe. Luckily they did save this courthouse too. Wee-Wah-Hitchcock means water eyes because there's 2 round lakes situated in the town, so it looks like water eyes. It's today one of the leading places for Tupelo honey and fish bait because one of the prime fishing spots in the southeast are the Dead Lakes. The Dead Lakes were created when a storm developed a huge sandbar at the mouth of the Tupelo River where it enters the Apalachicola River. It dammed up a huge area, flooded out enormous amounts acreage-wise, and it's still there. But it makes it a primary area for fishing with all the submerged swamplands and the trees and stuff. So it's a fisherman's paradise. If you've ever been, it almost reminds you of being on another planet. Take a look at that. I mean, it really is cool. There's a causeway and bridge that goes across it. And any time of the year, any time of the day, you get a completely different picture. At Port St. Joe, the modern county seat of Gulf County, back in the late 1830s, this was a site of Florida's first constitutional convention. And so they recreated this, and there's one of the original steam engines from Port St. Joe, commemorating the Florida Constitution here. There was a Centennial building. There's one of those logging railroads, so common. We also have the old St. Joseph Catholic Mission Church in Port St. Joe. And one of the forgotten treasures of the Panhandle, St. Joseph Peninsula State Park. Just a wonderful place. And there's scallops there too. Just look at that. I mean, those colors are absolutely gorgeous. And look at, man, there's a lot of people have been walking on that beach. Also, if you like shells, of course, everybody goes to Sanibel, but Sanibel's bar none. But you can go to St. Joseph Peninsula State Park, now near Cape San Blas. It juts so far into the Gulf, a lot of different currents hit, and you see a lot of large shells. So if you like large shells, you'll find stuff. And this is true. This is what the waters look like there. The Cape San Blas Lighthouse is in bad shape. Just a few years ago, I went up there, took some pictures and all that, but then just because of storms and tidal surge and stuff, the road has eroded out. What they're trying to do is move this in the keeper's quarters into downtown Port St. Joe, so it will be preserved. Now moving over to Franklin County, Fort Gadsden. This is in the middle of nowhere, Apalachicola National Forest. You go across Apalachicola Bridge and then take a left about 30 miles through swamp and woods, and you'll see a sign that says Fort Gadsden, and you get off on a gravel road, you travel for a mile. Then you see a sign that says Fort Gadsden, you get off on a clay road and travel for a mile. Then you see a sign that says Fort Gadsden, you get on a dirt road with white sand, and you just hope you've got AAA. But it doesn't matter because there's no cell phone reception. So you finally get down the banks of the Apalachicola River. In Fort Gadsden, was a site of an old trading post going back to the Spanish period. Then it was a site of a British fort during the War of 1812. It became the Negro Fort. Huge international incidents. Jackson in 1818, when he invaded Florida like he was always doing, renamed it Fort Gadsden. And so I always think about these poor people that had to live here, were stationed here. Do not go between March and October. I mean, the mosquitoes literally will carry you away to their young in their nest. Now, Tate's Hell, let me go back. Right down the road from here is Tate's Hell State Forest. Why would they name that? Back in the 1880s, a local settler named Sebe Tate, supposedly panthers were killing his cattle, so he walked off into the deep woods and swamps here looking for the panther, got turned around, got bit by a water moccasin, drank some bad water out there in the swamps, staggered out of the swamps near Carabel on the coast, and right before he died, he said, "I'm Sebe Tate, and I've been to hell." And so that's why they call this swamp Tate's Hell. But it's really a beautiful, every time I go there, I see bald eagles, I see bears, I see wild boars. It's amazing. And there is the dwarf cypress boardwalk out in the middle of nowhere for about 75 acres. These are cypress trees that are 300 years old but not get taller than about 12 feet. We think it's because of the limestone underneath there, they're not getting the nutrients, but it's like a giant bay, and they built this tower out there so even in the middle of the summer, there's always a cool breeze, there's no mosquitoes. It is really a magical place. Now, Apalachicola. Apalachicola was the third largest cotton export site after New Orleans and Mobile before the Civil War. All that Eufaula, Columbus, cotton was coming down the Chattahoochee, down the Apalachicola. They had all these cotton warehouses stacked there in Apalachicola. It was a big place back before the Civil War. And Dr. John Gorey was one of the most famous residents. This is a guy that invents air conditioner. Yes, we should all pay homage to him. Go to his museum. Get down and kiss this machine, because Florida would not be livable without air conditioning and refrigeration. And funny thing, last time I was there, the air conditioner was broken in the museum. Oh my gosh. But now Dr. John Gorey was trying to treat yellow fever, he thought, by keeping the patients cool. So that's how he got thinking about trying to create mechanical ways of cooling the air. And Dr. John Gorey is one of the Floridians represented in Statuary Hall in the U.S. Capitol. Yay. We have the Rainey House Museum in Apalachicola. There are beautiful homes and churches all in just within like a 4-block area of downtown Apalachicola. Great little place to visit. The 1907 Gibson Inn, I've stayed here, beautiful bed and breakfast, and several times a year they have murder mystery weekends where all the merchants get involved in the whole community. It's really neat. The Old Methodist Church in Appalach, another bed and breakfast, just beautiful homes here. Oh my goodness, I'm lusting again. The Porter House, just scrumptious. Old Fort Coombs Armory. The Nature Trail to Apalachicola National Estuarine Research Reserve Nature Center. Whoever made this up perhaps never spoke it aloud. Oh my gosh. It's a mouthful, ain't it? St. Vincent Island's a cool national wildlife refuge. Back in the early 1900s, it was a big game hunter to put some exotic things like Asian elk and stuff on it. Today, they actually raise a particular type of red wolf. And once they got enough of them, they take them and reintroduce them into the Smokies and other areas across the Southeast. This is only reachable by boat, but it's a really cool place. I mean, you have gone to the far ends of the earth. St. George Island, other side of Apalachicola, we got another beautiful barrier island. I took this in the wintertime because there's no people there, but this is what St. George Island looks like, another one of these forgotten gems of Florida. The Cape St. George Lighthouse. It's smaller than Pensacola's, but let me tell you about this thing. It was leaning hazardously a few years ago, and they said, let's restore it, let's fix it. But one day they came over, it was laying in the surf zone, broke into 1,000 million bricks. They didn't give up. They collected all the bricks, they put it in a new location, and within 3 years, they had reassembled the Cape St. George Lighthouse for a little community. That is an amazing historic preservation project. Kudos to them. And by the way, it's when you go up there, the last part is very authentic. The last part, there is a square cutout about 3 feet square. So you have to climb up a ladder, put your walkers down there, and drag your feet up there. It's authentic. And let me tell you, people get stuck. And then it's not pretty. St. George Island State Park. If you want to get away from the crowds, this is one of those beautiful, forgotten places. And all the way down there along the Gulf. There's a good example of the sands and the dunes there. And going down Highway 98 to Carabel, still in Franklin County, this is one of what they call the Forgotten Coast. You can drive for like 30 miles and see primitive wilderness, the road, and the sound in barrier islands, and no development. That's not going to last forever. There's parts that will always be preserved, but you can see lots for sale here and there. Like, oh no, one of the last areas of virgin coastal Florida. One of these skeleton frame lighthouses at Crooked River near Carabel, it's been preserved. It has a restored keeper's quarters. And Camp Gordon Johnston Museum. Back in World War II, this huge facility was created to train soldiers for amphibious assaults. Now, they closed it down after World War II, but thousands of GIs trained here for Normandy, for Iwo Jima, for Okinawa. And so, they have every year a special week, and veterans come back and relive the miserable time they had stationed at Camp Gordon Johnston. And this is where the world's smallest police station was. Yes, it really is. He was even featured on the Tonight Show years ago. Oh my goodness. And so I just had to include that. And on the far side of Franklin County is Bald Point State Park. What you're looking into is Apalachee Bay. So if you were to look to the left, you would go up to St. Mark's and Wakulla Springs, the Big Bend area. So that's where we said we're going to stop this thing. But I also want to include our lost treasures. The Escambia County Courthouse on Palafox Street. I mean, can you imagine somebody wanting to tear something like that down today? But back then, it was old-fashioned. We need progress. Hotel San Carlos. Remember they said, oh, it's going to fall down. How many months did they try to dynamite it? Oh my goodness, beautiful, beautiful hotel. In Santa Rosa County, here's the 1850s Bay Point Mansion. And unfortunately, it was a victim of stupid kids having a campfire on 4th of July, 1980. Burned it down. The old Floridale Water Tower. This was a 1920s Florida development project. Beautiful Spanish-style hotel and water tower. Never opened. A beautiful structure gone. Here's a twofer. The Indianola Inn, one of these old-timey Gulf, hotels built on top of an Indian Temple mound. Well, I think the hotel eventually burned, and then back in the 50s, they cleared half of the Indian mound to put in a bowling alley. Later on, they just cleared the rest of it to make it even. I remember as a kid going to that bowling alley and seeing the rest of that. I said, well, that's wrong. The old Valparaiso Inn, which was built there overlooking Chautauqua Bay. Supposedly, Al Capone stayed there, but that's one of those things and we don't know if it's real or not. Here's another old-style hotel, Hotel Chautauqua, Defuniak Springs. The steamer Captain Fritz, this is how so many of our ancestors got around. These are things that plied the Escambia, Santa Rosa Sound, Chautauqua Bay, Chautauqua River, St. Andrews Bay, all over this time up until the 1920s and 30s. Here they are building the Holmes County Courthouse, the old Hotel Eureka in Bonifay. Well, here's another construction project, building the original Chipley L&N Railroad Depot. The Washington County Courthouse in Vernon, gone but not forgotten. The old Bayline Depot in Panama City. The Sherman Hotel, another structure that could so easily been renovated. The Bellamy Mansion, downtown Marietta. A Jackson County Courthouse, another courthouse that bit the dust. The Calhoun County Courthouse in Abe Springs. I love this photograph. It looks like, the general store at Hooterville and Green Acres. Expect Mr. Haney to be in there. The Colonial Inn in Bluntstown. The Armstrong Homestead in Liberty County in a place that starts with the letter E. Well, Estefanolga, I think it's called. That was typical of the homes that many of our pioneer families had in the Panhandle. This was a typical site. Graves Lumber Company in Liberty County. All these trees, pull out the cypress and the pine and all the other trees. The pier at City Park, Port St. Joe. I love this photograph. There's no telling how many safety violations are going on as we speak. I mean, but these, they apparently lived, I guess. Now, the St. Joe Paper Company. This was Ed Ball's concern. He was tied in with the DuPonts. That was a big concern. Now they're one of the largest landowners in that area. St. Joe Paper Company, oh my gosh, they had money. I'll tell you how much money Ed Ball had. If you go down to Gulf and Franklin counties, you notice that it goes to Eastern time zone. Now, supposedly the time changes at Apalachicola River, except for those two counties. Why? Because Ed Ball did not want to be off Eastern time zone with Jacksonville and every place else he's connected with. He changed time. When you got money, you can do anything. Another courthouse that has bit the dust, the Franklin County Courthouse in Apalachicola. And the old Chapman School, gone but not forgotten. So folks, that is our whirlwind tour through this forgotten realm of West Florida.